Can I ask about a different sort of tool that I know is used a lot, which is about like letter writing? You sort of mentioned it, writing letters to the person who's died, or the kind of empty chair where you get to speak to the person. And I'm just wondering sort of how that works, or what the kind of emotional, psychological function of that is, thinking about people out there who might wish to use this.
I think the basis of it is that we're narrative making beings and we need stories. And in some relationships, there are conflicts or unresolved difficulties that in writing a letter to the person, you can find a way of voicing them that can give you a sense of peace. You can't fix it because the person has died. But, you know, I worked with quite a lot older woman. She was like in her 70s, and her dad had died 30 years before. And she spent like 2 months with me writing him a page of a letter every week, and she'd read some of it to me. And through that process, we had the work of therapy, so she was supported. But she was, I think, creatively and in storytelling, you can actually connect with the child part of yourself. And in doing that, you can often, and I'm using your word, heal aspects of yourself that stay very raw and wounded. And it's an incredibly powerful tool. I worked with somebody else who wrote postcards to her partner. So she'd write like 4 lines, like he was still there. And then she kept them and she put them in a book. And it really helped her that first year, where the missing him was so miserable. The way that she could cope with it was distancing him, like he was in a different country. But in doing the postcards and then going back and reading the postcards that she'd written, it gave her a story that she could understand about her process of grief and her relationship to him. And again, it allowed her to adjust.
Well, in that sense, that there's always more to be said. And I think also, if you feel that there are things you wish you said, you know, the kind of regret, that actually the burden of the unsaid is quite painful. So being able to voice that and in some way have the conversation. And also, I guess, you know, something that you hear a lot is, you know, after someone's died, the urge to call them and to text them. And, you know, it doesn't go away, this need to carry on a conversation. But also, we often know what they would say back to us. You know, we do have their voices within us. So in a way, allowing that conversation to take place, I can see how that would be really helpful. And you know, not pretending that they are gone, but at the same time, they're not in terms of their presence in your life.
Absolutely. And in some ways, that's 2 parts, isn't it? It's finding repair for what was kind of unresolved in their lifetime, but also keeping them alive in memory and knowing them so well, and then being embedded in you, that they are a source. So, I mean, I've worked with young women who would say to their mum who died, should I marry this guy? And they would know what their mum would say, or should I take this job? Or, mum, what do you think of this name for my child? So those significant milestone moments that you really want your mum or your grandparent or whoever it is to be present, you can, as you say, find their voice and find what they believe because you know them so well. And that is really curative, I think. I think that's incredibly helpful.
Yeah. A technique that I'm also really interested in that I think is related to this, but a bit different, is visualization. And I think one of the stories that I go back to in your book is the one with the client called Max, who lost his mother at a very early age and had this intense longing for her, you know, the fantasy of just having lunch with her and not having memories of her in the way his siblings.
He was jealous of his siblings who had more memories, yeah.
And you use visualization with him in a way that's very powerful. And I just wonder, I mean, thinking about him and thinking about other stories, the way visualization works, because it's, I mean, here again, it's the imagination which sometimes causes pain and grief. You know, it's the traumatic memories, it's the future that's lost, but also the imagination comes in in this restorative way. So visualization seems really important there. So I wonder if you could just say a bit more about visualization and sort of
in the positive way.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, with what I used with Max was he had this hole. And so when we did a visualization, I tell people to breathe, to turn their attention internally and become aware of, is there an image? Is there a shape? And he was very aware of just a black hole. And that was, in a way, his mother shaped hole that he was missing. And then I followed him really to find what was going on. And he could find a way of connecting with her in a way that he hadn't by looking at old photographs. Most of her belongings had been thrown away by his dad. And so the dad had done, that very typical job of what you don't remember isn't going to hurt you. And what you don't know is better for you. And so he had very little kind of data. And of course, that drives you mad when you're grieving, because there are so many pieces of that puzzle that are missing that you kind of, go crazy wanting to fill in the pieces of the puzzle. But by using his imagination over a number of sessions, he could find a way of embodying her internally. But it was from an image of her as a photograph that he used, but he internalized it. And we know from EMDR, that you can use protective figures, nurturers in your way of supporting yourself. So it's a version of that you can internalize positive aspects for yourself that you can call on to support you when you need.